scope of supply chain. So let's say there is a manufacturer M1. On your left hand side, you will have your suppliers. Manufacturing के लिए you need raw materials. So you will have a tier 1 supplier, and you would also have a tier 2 supplier. Right? There could be multiple tier 1 suppliers, and tier 1 suppliers would have multiple tier 2 suppliers. For example, if we talk about an automotive manufacturer, let's say Maruti, what does Maruti manufacture? Actually, nothing. Maruti does not manufacture anything. They are just an assembly line, right? Or most of the automobile manufacturers, the OEMs that we call, don't manufacture by themselves. They are just managing the entire supply chain through suppliers and customers, right? So for a company like Maruti, who would be a tier 1 supplier? Let's say the person, the organization which is manufacturing tires would be a tier 1 supplier, and tier 2 supplier would be who is supplying processed rubber to the tire manufacturer. So tier 1 supplier could be your Seats of the world, the Bridgestones, the Polo, JK tires, and so on and so forth. Tier 2 manufacturers or tier 2 suppliers would be the plants who are producing rubber or supplying processed rubber to these tier 1 suppliers. Similarly, on the right hand side, you could have tier 1 customers. It could be your warehouse, it could be your distributors, or it could be your retailers. And then you have tier 2 customers, who could be your, again, end customers. So the scope of supply chain management starts from you need to manage right from tier 2 suppliers to tier 2 customers. That is the bandwidth that you should have. That is the bandwidth that one should have from tier 2 suppliers to right up to tier 2 customers. Right? Manufacturers say as you go towards the left, towards the suppliers, there is this technical term which is called upstream supply chain. And as you move towards the customers, it's called downstream supply chain. So you'll keep on hearing these words very, very often: upstream supply chain and downstream supply chain. So what are these? From a manufacturing point of view, if you move towards suppliers and manage that part of the supply chain, it's called upstream supply chain. The moment you go and manage towards the customers, and it's called downstream supply chain. Right? Now, in all our ERPs and data management stuff, these are termed as, the upstream supply chain is termed as procure-to-pay, P2P process, procure-to-pay. You are procuring stuff, and then finally you are making a payment to it. So if you remember the first slide that we talked about, this slide, these are nothing but procure-to-pay and order-to-cash cycles. So when the manufacturer himself is a customer, it's called procure-to-pay. So when the manufacturer is dealing with the supplier, he becomes a customer. Right? So he procures something and finally ends up paying for it. So that's called procure-to-pay cycle. And then similarly, on the right hand side, on the downstream side, you have order-to-cash cycle, O2C cycle. So very prominent terms in all, these are standard terms in all the ERP systems: P2P and O2C, procure-to-pay and order-to-cash. So whenever we are referring to procure-to-pay, you are dealing with, the manufacturer is dealing with the suppliers. Whenever you see or hear about this term, O2C, order-to-cash, the manufacturer is dealing with the customers. Right? So these are very standard terms. One important thing about these two cycles, if you look at this upstream and downstream supply chain, what happens is the planning is always from customer to suppliers. So the planning starts from tier 2 customers to tier 1 customer, then basis the demand, you start manufacturing, basis your manufacturing plans, you start procuring, right? And then when it comes to the execution part of it, it starts from tier 2 suppliers to tier 1 suppliers to manufacturers to your warehouses and finally to your end customers. So planning is always from downstream to upstream, and execution is always from upstream to downstream, from suppliers to end customers. So जितना हम planning का बात करेंगे, will start from the customer, and it will go all the way to your production systems and all the way back to your procurement cycles, right? Your suppliers. And execution will start from suppliers to all the way to customers.